It started on a night that smelled of rain and cheap coffee, a night when the world felt quiet enough for secrets to breathe. Evan Carter stood in the self-checkout lane of a nearly empty supermarket, the hum of fluorescent lights echoing above him. His hands trembled slightly as he scanned a loaf of bread and a can of soup, counting each beep as if his life depended on it. It was one of those evenings when exhaustion sat heavy in his bones, the kind of tired that sleep never fixed. He had no idea that in the next few minutes, everything, his job, his dignity, his heart, would hang on a whisper. Behind him, a soft click of heels broke the stillness. Sharp, deliberate, confident. The sound didn't belong in a grocery store past midnight. Evan turned, and the world seemed to slow. There she was, Alexandra Hale, his CEO, the woman whose name made even senior managers sit straighter. She was dressed too perfectly for the setting: black coat, hair sleek, eyes like polished glass. She looked like a secret wrapped in money and power. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, her gaze locked on him, steady, unreadable, like she'd been waiting for this moment. "Evan Carter," she said quietly, her voice low but cutting through the hum of the store, "never thought I'd find you here." He swallowed hard, forcing a nervous smile. "Miss Hale, I didn't know you shop at places like this." Her lips curved, almost amused. "I don't." The silence that followed wasn't normal silence. It was the kind that rearranges the air, the kind that says something dangerous is about to happen. Alexandra stepped closer, her perfume a cool blend of jasmine and authority filling his lungs. "Tell me something, Evan," she murmured, her tone soft but deliberate. "Do you have someone in your life?" He blinked, confused. "Someone? Like a girlfriend?" Her eyes held his like a challenge. "A partner? Anyone?" He shook his head slowly. "No, I know one." And then she leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper so quiet that the world around them seemed to disappear. "Then be mine," she said, "or lose your job." The words hit him like a slap. For a second, he thought he'd misheard. But the calm in her tone, the terrifying certainty in her eyes, it wasn't a joke. His chest tightened. You can't mean that." She tilted her head, almost pitying him. "I can. And I do." He stared at her, lost between disbelief and fear. "Why me?" Alexandra didn't look away. "Because you don't want anything from me, Evan. You're the only one who looks at me like I'm still human." Her voice cracked slightly on that last word, then steadied. "And I need that. I need someone to remind me I can still feel." He took a step back, the paper bag in his hand crinkling. "Miss Hale, this is wrong. You're my boss." She smiled faintly, though her eyes didn't. "Then call me Alexandra, when we're alone." The bag slipped from his hand, groceries scattering across the floor. "I'll give you a day to think," she said, her tone back to steel. "Tomorrow morning, in my office. Don't be late." Then she turned and walked away, her heels echoing like punctuation marks to a sentence that would change everything. Evan stood frozen among spilled groceries and fluorescent light, heart pounding, breath shallow. He wanted to believe it was a nightmare, but her scent still lingered, haunting and real. He barely slept that night. Every thought collided with another fear, anger, confusion, and something he didn't want to name. There had been a flicker in her eyes when she said those words. Not cruelty. Loneliness. And it was that flicker that scared him the most. By morning, he found himself standing in front of her office door, his reflection trembling in the glass. He wanted to walk away, but his body betrayed him. He knocked. "Come in," came that unmistakable voice. She sat behind her desk, back straight, eyes calm as the sea before a storm. "Well?" she asked. He hesitated, his throat dry. "If I say no, I lose my job." "Yes." "And if I say yes?" She leaned forward. "Then you pretend to be mine. Just for a while." "Why me?" he asked again, softer this time. Her eyes softened too, just for a heartbeat. "Because everyone else wants something from me, Evan. You never did." The words were simple, but they sank deep. He should have walked away, but instead, he nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "Okay." For the first time, she smiled. Not the practiced one she wore in meetings, but something fragile, human. "Good," she said. "Then let's begin." And in that moment, Evan Carter didn't know he had just stepped into a storm that would strip him bare until only truth, heartbreak, and something dangerously close to love remained. The next morning began like every other in Hale Industries, except for the silence that followed Evan everywhere he went. The office buzzed with the usual rhythm of keyboards, phones, and ambition, yet he felt outside it, walking through invisible glass. Every time he caught sight of Alexandra's office door, his stomach twisted. By noon, her assistant appeared beside his desk, quiet as a ghost. "Ms. Hale wants to see you. Now." His pulse quickened. He stood, straightened his tie, and walked the long corridor that always made him feel small. The moment he entered her office, the door clicked shut behind him like a secret. Alexandra sat by the window, sunlight painting her face in gold and shadow. She looked calm, unreadable. "Sit down, Evangelist." He obeyed, the air thick between them. "We'll be attending a charity gala this weekend," she said, tone businesslike. "You'll be by my side." He blinked. "As your date?" She looked up, eyes locking on his. "As my boyfriend." The word felt heavy, wrong, and yet it filled the room with something electric. "Why are you doing this?" he asked softly. Her jaw tightened. "Because people talk, Evan. They see me as cold, untouchable. The investors want someone stable, someone with a personal life. You'll help me look human again." He almost laughed, but the sound died in his throat. "You think pretending will make you human?" For a second, her mask cracked. "It's all I have left." Something inside him shifted then. Pity, maybe. Or understanding. "I'll do it," he said quietly. but not forever. She nodded. Just until the storm passes. But storms have a way of growing when no one's watching. That night, he found himself at a high-end tailor, standing beside her as fabrics brushed his skin. She watched silently as he was fitted for a suit, her eyes tracing him like she was memorizing something she shouldn't. At the gala, flashes of cameras exploded like fireworks. Alexandra walked in first, every movement perfect, a queen built of confidence and silk. Evan followed, his hand trembling until she reached for it. Her fingers slipped into his, warm and steady. The crowd turned. Whispers rose. "Who's he?" someone murmured. "Her new boyfriend." She smiled, radiant and practiced, and whispered just for him, "Breathe." So he did. Hours passed like scenes from a film he didn't belong in. Music, laughter, champagne, the click of cameras. Yet every time she looked at him, really looked, the room blurred away. When the night ended, they stood outside under the glow of city lights, rain starting to fall again, soft and familiar. "You did well," she said, her tone softer than he'd ever heard it. "Did I?" he asked. Because it felt like lying. Her eyes lifted to meet his. "Everything in my world is a lie, Evan. That's the only way to survive." The rain began to soak through his jacket, but he didn't move. She looked almost fragile, then makeup smudging, mascara dark against her skin. "Why does surviving have to hurt so much?" he whispered. She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer, so close he could feel her breath. "You ask questions no one else dares. And you give answers no one believes." Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but instead she turned away. "Good night, evangelist." He watched her leave, heart beating too fast for all the wrong reasons. Over the next few weeks, their act deepened. Dinners, business events, quiet car rides through city lights. They played their parts well, too well. Every touch, every glance meant to convince others started to convince them too. One evening, she invited him to her penthouse to prepare for an upcoming event. He arrived early, the city glowing below like spilled gold. She opened the door barefoot, her hair loose for once, eyes tired. "You're early." "I couldn't sleep," he admitted. She smiled faintly. "Neither could I." They talked about nothing and everything. About her father, who'd built the company from dust and shadows, about her mother, who'd left when she was 10, about the nights she worked until sunrise because silence was the only thing that didn't demand anything from her. He listened, really listened. And in return, she listened to him talk about growing up in a small town, about his mother's laughter, about losing her to illness and working 2 jobs just to keep his apartment. Somewhere between laughter and tears, the distance between them dissolved. When she reached out and brushed her fingers against his, it wasn't an act. "I didn't mean for this to get complicated," she whispered. "Neither did I." The room went still, filled with things that didn't need words. He could have kissed her. He almost did. But then her phone rang, shattering the moment. She stepped away, her face returning to that cool, practiced calm. "Duty calls," she said softly, her voice trembling just enough for him to notice. He nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, I get it." But as he walked out of her penthouse, the city lights below him looked lonelier than ever. He was falling, and he didn't even know if she'd catch him. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into something that felt like years. The lines between truth and pretense blurred until Evan no longer knew where the act ended and his heart began. The office had become a stage where every glance, every shared smile, every whisper behind closed doors carried a meaning that no one else could see. To the world, they were the perfect power couple, the cold, brilliant CEO and the kind, steady man who'd somehow thawed her. But behind the facade, the air grew heavier each day, thick with words neither of them dared to speak. It was late one evening when the cracks began to show. The rain tapped softly against the tall glass windows of her office, and the city beyond glowed like molten gold. Alexandra stood by her desk, staring at a folder that held numbers and decisions, but her mind was far away. Evan entered quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee, his shirt sleeves rolled up, tired but gentle. "You've been here since morning," he said softly. "You need to rest." She didn't turn. "Rest is for people who can afford to lose." "You're not losing," he said, placing the coffee on her desk. She laughed, a brittle, beautiful sound. "Aren't I? My board's restless. The press keeps digging into my life. And now, half of them think I'm distracted because of you." His heart sank. "Because of me?" She turned finally, her eyes sharp, but her voice trembling just beneath the surface. "They say you've changed me, made me softer. That I'm not as ruthless as before. Do you know what softness costs in my world, Evan?" He looked at her, searching for the woman he'd glimpsed behind the armor, the one who'd once laughed at his terrible jokes over takeout noodles. "Maybe softness isn't weakness," he said quietly. Her expression broke for a moment. "It is, when the world is waiting for you to fall." He took a step closer. "Then let them wait. You're not alone anymore." She looked at him like she wanted to believe that. And maybe, for a second, she did. But then the phone on her desk buzzed, the moment shattered, and she turned away again. "We can't do this, Evangelist." He froze. "Do what?" "This. Whatever this is. It was supposed to be pretend." "It stopped being pretend a long time ago," he said, his voice low but steady. Her breath caught. "Don't say that." "Why not?" "Because I can't afford to feel this." "Maybe you can't afford not to." Silence. The kind that hurts to breathe through. He waited, hoping she'd turn back, but instead she whispered, "Go home, Evangelist." He didn't move. "Please," she added, her voice cracking on that one word. So he left, the sound of rain following him down the hall, like a heartbeat fading into distance. That night, he walked the city streets aimlessly, her words echoing in his head. Every step felt heavier. He thought of quitting, of freeing them both from the lie. But every time he pictured her face, he couldn't do it. The next morning, he went to work early. When she arrived, she looked exhausted, eyes rimmed red, expression carefully blank. She avoided him during meetings, avoided his gaze in the hallway. But every time their paths crossed, something unspoken passed between them, an ache that no amount of distance could silence. A week later, the story broke. CEO Alexandra Hale's secret affair with employee uncovered. The headline spread like wildfire. Photos from the gala, videos from events, whispers from co-workers, all stitched together into a narrative the press devoured. Her board demanded an emergency meeting. Evan wasn't allowed in, but he could hear the voices through the glass walls, sharp, angry, accusing. When the doors finally opened, she stepped out, her face pale but calm. "Go home," she told him softly. "You're suspended until further notice." He stared at her, stunned. "You're firing me?" "Protecting you," she said. "If I don't, they'll destroy your name too." He shook his head. "I don't care about my name, Alexandra. I care about you." Her eyes glistened, but she forced a smile. "Then forget me. That's the only way to save us both." He wanted to fight, to argue, to hold her, but the walls around her were back taller, colder than ever. So he walked away, his chest hollow, his world collapsing in quiet pieces. That night, the city rain fell harder than ever. Evan sat in his apartment, the news blaring from the TV, her picture flashing over and over, words like scandal, resignation, betrayal floating through the air. He turned it off. He didn't know how long he sat there, staring into the dark, but when the knock finally came, he almost didn't answer. When he opened the door, Alexandra stood there, drenched, shivering, her eyes broken in a way he'd never seen. "They turned on me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The board, the media, everyone. They want me out." He stepped closer, his voice soft. "Then stay here." She shook her head, tears mixing with rain. "I can't." "Yes, you can. You don't have to face this alone." Something inside her broke then. She reached for him, her hand trembling. "I told you not to fall for me," she said. "Too late," he whispered. And then, for the first time, she let herself collapse into him, her walls gone, her strength gone, only the woman beneath the CEO left standing in the rain. Morning arrived gray and heavy, the kind of light that made even glass buildings look tired. The story of Alexandra Hale's downfall had become the city's favorite drama, whispered in elevators, printed on every blog that fed on ruin. In a single week she had gone from the untouchable queen of business to a headline dripping with speculation. And through it all, Evan watched helplessly, the ache in his chest growing deeper with every rumor that twisted the truth. He hadn't seen her since that rain-soaked night. She'd vanished behind silence, her phone off, her office locked. Then, on the fifth evening, a message came, 6 words that changed everything. "Meet me where it all began." The supermarket. The same aisle, the same dim lights, the same hum of loneliness. She stood there in jeans and a sweater, stripped of every trace of power, her hair loose, her eyes hollow. "I thought you'd hate me," she whispered. "I tried," he said, his voice rough, "but I couldn't." For a moment she looked like she might cry, but instead she smiled, small, sad, human. "They took everything, Evan. The company, the board seat, my reputation. All of it." He stepped closer. "Then we start over." She shook her head slowly. "You don't understand. The board offered me a deal. They'll drop the charges, keep the investors calm, if I publicly deny everything." He stared at her. "Deny us?" Her silence was answer enough. "Say you used me," he said bitterly. "If I don't, they'll destroy what's left of my family's name." His throat tightened. "So that's it?" Tears finally escaped her eyes, glistening under the supermarket's cold lights. "I don't have a choice." "Yes, you do," he said quietly. "You just don't like it?" She looked up at him, the strength returning to her face. "You think I'm a coward?" "I think you're scared," he said. "And that's okay. But don't lie about what we were. Don't let them rewrite it." Her lips parted, words trembling on the edge of her tongue, but she couldn't speak. Instead, she turned away, whispering, "Goodbye, evangelist." He watched her leave the aisle, the same sound of heels that had once drawn him in now echoing like the end of a song. Days passed in silence. She held a press conference, standing under blinding lights, the world watching. Her voice was calm, steady, practiced. There was never a personal relationship. Mr. Carter was simply a dedicated employee who became the subject of false speculation. He watched it live, feeling something inside him tear clean through. And when she left the stage, reporters shouting her name, he knew it was truly over. He packed his few things from the office the next day. No one spoke to him. Some looked away, others whispered. By evening he walked out of Hale Industries for the last time, the city air sharp and empty around him. For weeks he drifted. Freelance work, quiet cafes, nights staring at the skyline. He told himself he'd forget, that she'd made her choice. But every time the wind shifted, he could almost hear her voice low, certain, breaking. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived. No sender's name, just his written in looping ink. Inside, a single page. "You were right. I was scared. But you made me see who I could be without the armor. I'm leaving the city. If you ever want to find me, come to the place where we used to breathe." He read it 3 times before realizing what it meant. The small lake on the city's edge, the one they'd driven to once after a late meeting, just to escape the noise. That night he went. The air smelled of pine and rain. The lake mirrored the stars like glass. And there she was, sitting on the old wooden pier, barefoot, the wind tugging at her hair. "I didn't think you'd come," she said softly. "I didn't think you'd leave," he answered. She smiled faintly. I had to find out who I am without the empire. He sat beside her, the wood creaking beneath them. And who are you? She looked at the reflection of the stars. Someone who finally knows what she wants. He turned to her. And what's that? Her eyes met his, clear and sure. You. Not as an employee. Not as a rumor. Just you. The wind moved around them, gentle, forgiving. He reached out, and this time she didn't pull away. They stayed like that, hands entwined, silence stretching between them, the kind that heals instead of hurts. The world behind them still whispered, still judged, but for the first time, neither of them cared. The lake became their beginning again, quiet and unassuming, a place untouched by ambition or gossip. Alexandra rented a small cottage nearby, far from the city skyline that once defined her, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to breathe without calculating every inhale. Evan visited every weekend at first, then stayed longer, until weekends blurred into weeks, and weeks into something that felt like a lifetime gently unfolding. The world outside still talked, of course. Headlines faded, replaced by new scandals, new names. But occasionally, an article surfaced, former CEO spotted living quietly outside the city. People speculated, debated, moved on. Yet to the two of them, none of it mattered anymore. She spent her mornings writing, journals filled with messy handwriting and unfinished thoughts. He painted again, something he hadn't done since his mother died, small canvases of light, color, and peace. Sometimes she would stand behind him, her chin resting on his shoulder, and whisper, "You make the world softer." And he would smile, because she no longer said that softness was weakness. But healing wasn't easy. Some nights she woke in panic, reaching for her phone, still half expecting a call from her board. Other nights, she would sit by the lake's edge, staring at her reflection, whispering apologies to the woman she used to be. Evan never tried to fix it. He just sat beside her, silent, steady, the way someone stays near a flame learning how to burn gently again. One afternoon, a letter arrived, not from the press, not from the company, but from a group of young women in the city. They'd read her old interviews, seen the fallout, and wrote, "You made us believe we could lead, even when they said we couldn't." Alexandra cried quietly that day, her tears falling onto the paper like forgiveness. Later, she said, "Maybe it wasn't all for nothing." He took her hand, smiling softly. "Maybe it never is." Seasons changed. Spring folded into summer, the lake glimmered like liquid gold, and laughter returned to their days. They planted a small garden outside the cottage, tomatoes, basil, and a stubborn lemon tree that refused to grow for months, until one morning it bloomed, a single bright fruit shining against the green. She laughed when she saw it, that rare, unguarded laughter that made him fall for her all over again. "See," he said, teasing. "Some things just take time." She nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "So do people." That night, under a sky scattered with stars, she finally said the words neither of them had dared to speak before. "I love you," she whispered. "Not because I need you. Not because you saved me. But because you saw me when I was invisible." He looked at her, his eyes soft and full. "I never saw the CEO," he said. "I just saw you." And then, without hesitation, she kissed him, not the kind of kiss that hides fear, but the kind that promises something real, something earned. Months later, Alexandra started a foundation, Hail Forward, dedicated to helping young entrepreneurs who'd been silenced or overlooked. She refused interviews, refused headlines, let the work speak for itself. And beside her, always, was Evan, running community art programs for children, painting hope on blank walls, smiling the same gentle smile that had changed her life. People who visited the foundation sometimes whispered when they recognized her. Some asked why she'd left everything behind. She would just smile and say, "Because power means nothing if it costs you your heart." In the evenings, they'd walk by the lake, fingers interlaced, the air humming with crickets and calm. The world that once demanded perfection from her now felt far away, like another life lived by another woman. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked one night. She thought for a long moment, her gaze on the water. "No," she said finally. "But I think it misses me." He laughed softly, pulling her close. "Then let it. We've got better things to build." The moonlight wrapped around them, silver and kind. In that quiet, you could almost hear the heartbeat of a story that had finally found peace, two souls who had learned that love was not about possession or control, but about the courage to be seen, completely, imperfectly, and still stay. And so, under the same stars that once watched them fall apart, they built something no rumor, no scandal, no world could ever take, the kind of love that begins in silence and ends in forever.